Nothing is guaranteed. All right, everybody, welcome aboard here to the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you. I know we don't do a lot of basketball here on the channel, but after Saturday night's epic Game 7 between the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks, got to talk about it. It was a huge game, huge story, and really the Nets have been a big story in this area and, of course, in the NBA with all the talent they've had this year, and, of course, the expectations that this was a team expected. All the media pundits this year expecting the Nets to go out there and win an NBA title this year, even during the season, even during the postseason, when a team like the Lakers got knocked out of the playoffs, the expectation still was that the Nets were the best team out there put together and that they should win the NBA title. It didn't happen because, as we all know, and we keep having to learn this lesson the hard way, nothing is guaranteed. You can have all the talent you want on the floor. You can have every all-star you want on the floor or on the field, on the ice. Doesn't matter. Nothing is guaranteed at all. And that was the case here with the Nets. And really this entire season, when you think about it and you look at back at this season for the Nets in a nutshell, that's pretty much the case. Because, yes, well, they did win 48 games and they set a lot of records, franchise records for that matter. And when they were healthy, they were a team that was unstoppable. This was a team that had its faults. This was a team that had flaws. And, of course, the injuries did not help either. And let's just be honest here. Sean Marks put all of his chips to the front of the table here this year. Okay? 2 years ago, going out there and trading for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Then coming into this season, trading 3 first-round picks and 4 players, including Jarrett Allen and Karis LeVert, in that 3-team deal with Houston and Cleveland to get James Harden here to town. Then you bring in Blake Griffin. Then you try to bring in LaMarcus Aldridge. The Nets were going for it big time this year. It did not work out, as we all know. The injuries certainly played a large role in that. Harden missing 20 out of the last 21 games of the year. The hamstring injury that propped up in the start of this series against the Milwaukee Bucks. Keep in mind, this was a player who was out of shape at the beginning of the year after he had a spat with the Houston Rockets where he didn't want to play for them and got out of shape. So there was that issue with him. You had the hamstring injuries with Durant. You had the ankle injury with Kyrie, and Kyrie had Irving had his own issues as well as far as going AWOL. You also had DeAndre Jordan losing his starting job this year. Aldridge, after the Nets signed him, ends up retiring. It was a very weird team and a hard team to kind of root for that matter, because even with all these stars, they all have their own little idiosyncrasies this year. When you have these kind of teams, it doesn't guarantee anything. And I think in a lot of ways, this did blow up in the face of Sean Marks. It blew up in the face of Steve Nash this year with this team, as good as they are. And even with that said, they still had a chance to win this series. And I know that there was an article I saw here on ESPN. They did an interview with Steve Nash, who says that there are one of too many obstacles that the Nets face this year. Yeah, I mean, from the injury standpoint, yeah, they faced a lot of obstacles this year. That said, the Nets still had a chance to win this game and win this series. Both of these teams were exchanging leads back and forth throughout the course of this game. The Nets had a 10-point lead in the second quarter. They had a 5-point lead with about 4 minutes to go in the game, and still couldn't get the job done. Give the Bucks a lot of credit. They out-physicaled the Nets. They outplayed the Nets, especially in the second half of this game. And really throughout the series, they played great defense against the Nets team that had been a team that was shooting the lights out in their previous series against Boston. Let's go back into that fourth quarter. Nets up now by a score of 101-96. And then everything starts to turn around in the other direction for Milwaukee. Starting with the Chris Middleton three-point shot, turns it into a 2-point game. Then you have the miss by Durant, eventually leads to a Giannis Antetokounmpo 2-point shot, ties the game up at 111, and then finally Jrue Holiday giving the Bucks the lead at 104-101. Now, Durant, even though he did miss that shot there, was unbelievable in this game. 48 points for Kevin Durant in this game. He carried the Nets. And if any one player carried this team, not just throughout this tournament, but even for large stretches of this season, it was Kevin Durant. And what a postseason he had. If the Nets had won this series, he would have been easily, and if they had won this series, gone to the Eastern Conference Finals, and taken on the Hawks, he would have been easily a candidate to be the MVP of this postseason because he was tremendous in this series. Again, 48 points in this game. Even earlier in the series, put the Nets on his back in game 5, and carried them to a victory in that game. Hits the 2 big shots at the end of regulation here in Game 7, including the 24-foot jumper where he had his foot on the line with about 6 seconds to go in regulation. That ties the game at 1-9 and sends it to overtime. And overtime was, for that matter, folks, as we all know, was very, very sloppy on both sides. The officiating was horrible in the overtime. A lot of bad shots by both teams. But what stood out to me was the fact that you had Harden on the floor, and he missed 3 shots to James Harden. 3 big shots, including one with 1:42 to go in overtime. That was big because the Nets still had a 2-point lead. It was a 2-point lead for the Nets for about 3.5 minutes in overtime. And they couldn't add on to that lead. Couldn't do anything. Couldn't hit a shot. As we all know, the Bucks made the Nets pay. Giannis hitting the 2-point shot, tying the game at 111, and then Chris Middleton with the Reggie Miller-esque 360 spin shot that gives the Bucks the 113-111 lead, and they end up winning the game. And of course, even with that said, Durant did miss the 2 big shots at the end that could have either tied the game or even won the game for that matter, where he airmailed it with 0.3 seconds to go. But again, I'm not going to get on Durant because he played lights out in this game and throughout this series. I will get on the fact that, hey, look, you can talk about injuries. You can talk about all the problems you had this year. The facts are this. The Nets had all-stars all over this team. The Nets had all-stars on the floor here in Game 7. The Nets had every opportunity to win this game in Game 7 and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals against Atlanta, who has beaten Philadelphia in their series to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. Instead, we're talking about a team that is now going into the offseason. They missed big shots down the stretch. Harden missed big shots. Even KD missed big shots. They had every chance to do something and to win this game, and to win this series. And if they had won this game in this series, no one would be talking about any kind of excuses or injuries for that matter. So it is what it is with the Nets from that standpoint. It is a major, major disappointment. This was a team that had high expectations, and they couldn't get the job done. And the question now is, as we turn towards the future here with the Brooklyn Nets, is what's next? Because they have the supposed big 3, Harden, Irving, and Durant, all coming back obviously next year. They have all 3 of them are under contract for the next 2 years officially, but they do have opt-outs after next season. So there's a lot of questions about the future of this team. They have to go all in again. They have to go all in and get players to put around these guys, a better core and a better bench to put around these guys, because as we've seen this year, nothing, as we all know, is guaranteed, and especially when you have players who have a tendency to get injured and injured often, for that matter, as we saw this season with the Nets, especially in the playoffs. So it is a big season next year for the Nets. This was a major disappointment this year. You can't no other way to cut it. Major disappointment this year for Brooklyn to not get the job done. So again, leave your thoughts below, folks. What do you think about how this season ended for the Brooklyn Nets? And I know that there are probably a lot of Knicks fans, for that matter, who are probably a little giddy. I can understand that as well, watching their crosstown rivals go down in the playoffs. So you can leave your thoughts about that as well. And we'll keep it here. Remember, folks, like and subscribe here to the Sports Talk Nation. Follow us at OpenMicNJ on Twitter and Facebook.com/OpenMicProgram. We'll talk to you next time.